I just recently ran into an article where they're saying a record number of CEOs are quitting, and I'm trying to understand why. I have not seen this before. I want to make sure that we get to the money, and I wanted to review this, but I said that instead of me watching it alone, I'm gonna watch it with my friends over at the Bag Chasers. Make sure y'all get that Teach Henley 30% off your first order plus a free gift. We just renewed our sponsorship deal. Shout out to Teach Henley. Then on top of that, make sure y'all tap into the Patreon link is in the description as well as pinned to the top of the chat.
The COVID-19 pandemic had a huge effect on the American labor force.
Do not call in unless you disagree with me. Do not call in, and I'm not going to put y'all on camera, and you could disagree with me about whatever it is. It's a special Monday. Do not call in unless you disagree with me.
More than 47 million Americans quit their jobs in 2021. More than 50 million quit in 2022. The so-called quit rate finally dipped back to pre-pandemic levels in April of 2023. Now there's another group of Americans leaving their jobs in record numbers, the big bosses. More than 1,500 CEOs have stepped down from their posts this year, according to a report by Challenger Gray & Christmas.
We're seeing the highest number of CEO exits that we've recorded over the first 10 months of any year since we started looking at this in 2002. This really is a huge exodus of CEOs.
The exodus includes some of the biggest companies, with CEOs departing from YouTube, BP, Walgreens, and X, formerly known as Twitter.
They still think that something bad is happening.
Now y'all got to remember, as y'all look at the list of these people, look at this. Let me go back over this again. BP, YouTube, Walgreens, X, formerly known as Twitter, and so on and so forth. A lot of these is not just people stepping down and quitting. A lot of these are people that's getting forced out. A lot of these are not people that's just stepping down and quitting. They are people that are being forced out of their position. Elon Musk came in and he fired everybody. Walgreens is at a disadvantage because they are absolutely going under based off of the fact that they're having bad earnings and they can't solve for the problem as far as people stealing from out of their stores. And then they can't compete against the CVS's. You know, when you see a lot of these different people, it's not that people are being fired. Is when it plays out at the top, most of the time they give you an option, right? They allow for you to be able to keep your equity, your stock options, all of that, right? But a lot of times they will force you out. So this is not just CEOs walking away a lot of times and quitting. This is them being forced out by the board because these are publicly traded companies a lot of times.
Twitter.
They still think that something bad is happening around the corner.
Uncertainty is the killer right now for CEOs. CEOs need to know what the policy is. They need to know where interest rates are going. They need to know the macro environment, and none of that is clear at this moment.
The stress from heading a company during the pandemic is now exacerbated with headwinds from rising geopolitical tensions, stubborn inflation, and the lingering possibility of a recession. These trends not only affect CEOs, they can also lead to cost-cutting, hiring freezes, and layoffs affecting employees at every level. When unforeseen, tumultuous times like that occur, many companies like to retain their CEOs to help navigate them through the rough time. When those times end and normalcy returns, CEO turnover becomes more common.
I would say,
you know, and another interesting fact is, like, if you look at what happened over at Disney, and I pinned the link to the top of the chat for y'all to be able to call in. So I'm going to start bringing y'all up probably within the next 5 minutes. When you see what happened, for example, over at Disney, Bob Iger retired, and he was largely considered to be one of the greatest CEOs of all time. And he retired right before the pandemic. Nobody foreseen, obviously, the pandemic coming. That could be debated, too. But then the next Bob, I forgot what the next Bob's name was, but it was Bob something. And he had been with the company, and he was basically overseeing all of the Disney parks. And they had been thriving and growing throughout his tenure there. And so he handed over the reins, and then the company started going into financial ruin. Now, some people blame that on Bob Iger, who now is the new CEO again. So they brought him back out of retirement in order to try to right the ship. But he set things in place that basically allowed for, there's supposed to be a good handover into the next CEO. But Bob Iger basically presided over the company, and he did a lot of great things. He led the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He purchased, or he stewarded them through the purchase of a lot of different acquisitions. He was there when they bought the Star Wars franchise. He was there when they basically got into business as far as the whole Avatar franchise. And so they were thriving as they continued to grow, but he also did a lot of missteps that we didn't see until they start having a tumultuous time, such as trying to compete against Netflix with Disney Plus, pulling all of their IPs and their movies off a lot of these platforms in order to try to bolster their own streaming services instead of repositioning themselves, going into the woke movement and starting to lead the Disney Marvel Cinematic Universe in phase 2 down this bad path, creating and throwing a bunch of money into a lot of these bad movies. And so now when they brought him back, he fired the person that was a steward over the country or over the company for a long time in order to try to right the ship that was already going down based off of the things that he set forth in his tenure, right? And so the board approved for him to, or for the other previous CEO that replaced him to get fired. It's not that these guys step down. They get a golden parachute. They get a bag. I mean, they get tens and tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to ultimately leave the company. And then the new CEO steps in order to try to right the ship. We've seen this happen during the pandemic. We've seen it happen during the 2008 recession with Ford Motor Company. Alan Mulally came in from a major aircraft manufacturer in order to try to right the Ford Motor Company. They mortgaged the entire company, including the Ford logo, in order to try to survive through the recession, which they did. He was rewarded handsomely. He made hundreds of millions of dollars. But then on the flip side, when Mark Fields came in, who was largely with the company as an engineer all the way up and through that time, and then he replaced them, he was quickly replaced by a new CEO, right? Because the stock price didn't rebound as they thought that it would as they continued to become more profitable and they was able to get out of the recession, right? And then ultimately, UAW struck because they said you've been taking care of the CEOs and all of this stuff this entire time. So there's more context to this surface level conversation of why CEOs ultimately quit companies. Most of them don't. They'll stay there as long as they possibly can until it's a merger, until there's a board approval or a board forces you out, or you make some huge mistake that doesn't give shareholders back a return on their investment, right? They want that stock price to go up. They want dividends to continue to be spread about.
There are at least 4 reasons why we've seen an uptick in CEO turnover over the past few months. Those would be delayed CEO retirement, CEO burnout,
Nope.
concerns about CEO underperformance,
Yep.
and then finally high-performing CEOs who are taking this opportunity to level up to a more attractive opportunity.
One of the sectors seeing the highest CEO departures is tech, which is still being plagued with massive layoffs across the industry.
We doing Stock Club, and I don't know what the name of it is going to be, but it's going to be inside the Patreon. So I'm incentivizing you guys. I'm trying to convince you guys to sign up because at least once a month, I'm going to be doing a review of what I have in my portfolio, the companies that I'm researching, and we're going to have debates and conversations on what we should invest in long term and the things that we probably should stay away from. And we're going to break it out into different industries: tech, automotive, manufacturing, textile, banking, and so on and so forth, right? In order to make sure that we're repositioning our portfolios here at the Bag Chasers to make sure that you guys get the best return possible, okay?
However, the other is in healthcare, which typically doesn't see significant labor changes in a recession.
So there is a lot of change in these industries. The way we would
I'm about to start pulling you guys up right after I read the super chats.
that is healthcare and technology were 2 areas of the economy that saw huge spikes in demand during COVID. They were on massive hiring sprees. They adjusted their companies to move towards a world that looked like we were in a pandemic, and now that it has receded, they're starting to make lots of changes. They maybe are coming back down to earth a little bit from those pandemic highs of demand, and with that, they're bringing in new CEOs to help deliver.
The average cost to replace an employee can range around 1.5 to 2
Way
times
more with
their
CEOs.
salary, but replacing a CEO is far more costly. CEO pay has been steadily increasing for decades, and in 2022, CEOs of S&P 500 companies commanded a whopping $16.7 million annual paycheck on average.
Let me break this down, and then I'm gonna start bringing y'all up. Why do CEOs make so much money? Because what people don't understand about executive compensation packages is that often, at times, they don't return back. This is the final stop for them. A lot of them are already in comfortable careers. They're in great spaces. And so in order for them to take that position, you're going to really have to make it worth their while because their compensation package is tied to the performance of the company. Most of their pay is based off of equity and bonuses. It's not in the base pay. As a matter of fact, a lot of them just make six figures in base pay. And then their equity and bonuses, which does not mature until later on, which incentivizes them to do the thing that's in the best interest of the shareholders. And that's why they have to do the thing that's going to be best for the company because their success is tied to the success of the company. I think Andy Jasper didn't even make any money last year from Amazon. Andy Jasper, do y'all know who Andy Jasper is? Let me research to make sure he didn't get paid. Is it Andy Jasper? No, not Andy Jasper. Who was the CEO of Andy Jassy? Andy Jassy, that's his name. Andy, not Jasper. Andy Jassy. Paid 2022. He was only paid $1.3 million in 2022, including a $317,000 base salary, another $981,000 in 401k plan contributions and security costs. In 2021, think about this for a minute. Amazon didn't do that well as far as profitability in 2022. In 2021, they boomed because that was right after the pandemic, right? Or right during the pandemic. In 2021, he made $212 million. In 2022, including his 401k contributions and his $317,000 in base salary, he made $1.3 million. Their success and their compensation, and I know a lot of people, well, that was still a lot of money. Their success and their compensation is largely tied to the success of the company. And so when they have these vested options that they can then exercise after a certain period of time, which most times that they don't, because they don't want to pay the taxes that's associated with it. So they still incentivize to have the company be successful after that. It's only tied to that. So if the company don't do well, not only can you lose your job, but you also don't get paid that much. And so that's why they're incentivized to do the thing that's in the best interest of the shareholders. Why are you getting laid off? Because you're not adding no value into the company and they can't justify you to the shareholders and keeping a division that just open just to give you a job. That's not what this is. When you're a publicly traded company or privately held company, you have to justify your existence because the marketplace is going to determine your success. And if you can't compete against other companies, including being nimble, being successful, merging different divisions, synergies, all of that stuff, then you are going to be on the outs, man.